Welcome to True.
The Bravest, fdny's role on September 11, 2001. A documentary narrative of American firefighters on 9/11. Disclaimer: this is a documentary-style narrative based on real events, reports, and testimonies from September 11, 2001. This story honors the 343 firefighters who gave their lives and the thousands who responded that day. Chapter 1: The First Alarm, 8:46 a.m., September 11, 2001, started as an ordinary Tuesday morning for the fire department of New York. Over 11,000 firefighters were either on duty or off duty across the 5 boroughs. Day shifts had just begun, equipment checks were underway, morning coffee was brewing in firehouses across the city. At exactly 8:46 a.m., everything changed. American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center between the 93rd and 99th floors. The impact was catastrophic, a massive explosion that could be heard for miles. A Boeing 767 traveling at 465 miles per hour had just become a weapon, carrying 10,000 gallons of jet fuel that had ignited on impact. Within seconds of the impact, the fdny dispatch system activated. The first alarm came through at 8 hours 46 minutes and 26 seconds a.m., just 26 seconds after impact. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but urgent. Box 8087, report of a plane striking the World Trade Center. This was unprecedented. The World Trade Center had its own fire safety protocols, its own fire brigade, its own evacuation plans, but a plane strike? This was beyond anything anyone had trained for. The first units to respond were the closest firehouses, Engine Company 10 and Ladder Company 10, located directly across the street from the World Trade Center complex, were on scene within 2 minutes. What they saw was incomprehensible: flames shooting from the upper floors of the North Tower, debris raining down, people hanging from windows, smoke billowing into that perfect blue sky. Battalion Chief Joseph Pfeiffer was among the first fdny officers on scene. He'd been on a routine gas leak call just blocks away when the plane hit. He looked up, saw the gaping hole in the tower, saw the flames, and immediately radioed a second alarm, then a third, then a fourth. Within minutes, he elevated it to a 5th alarm, the highest level of response. A 5th alarm meant every available unit in Lower Manhattan would respond. Fire engines, ladder trucks, rescue companies, squad companies. Hundreds of firefighters were now heading toward the World Trade Center. Chief Pfeiffer established the command post in the lobby of the North Tower at 8:50 a.m., just 4 minutes after impact. The marble lobby that had been beautiful and calm just minutes before was now chaos. Glass everywhere, water flooding from broken pipes, people streaming down from the upper floors, confused and terrified, the ceiling panels hanging loose, and through the broken windows, the sound of debris hitting the plaza outside, debris that included people who had jumped from the upper floors because the heat and smoke left them no other choice. Chapter 2: The Response, 8:50 a.m. to 9:03 a.m. By 8:50 a.m., the fdny response was massive and coordinated. Fire engines and ladder trucks were converging on the World Trade Center from every direction. Firefighters were arriving in full gear, 75 pounds of equipment, including oxygen tanks, hoses, tools, and radios. The standard procedure for a high-rise fire is methodical and well-practiced. Establish a command post. Assess the situation, identify the fire floor, set up a staging area 2 floors below the fire, bring hoses and equipment up the stairwells, attack the fire from below while search and rescue teams look for trapped civilians. But this was no standard high-rise fire. The fire was on the 93rd floor and above, almost 100 floors up. Firefighters would have to climb over 90 floors in full gear while carrying additional equipment. Each floor would take time, energy. The heat in the stairwells was already intense, and the fire was spreading, fed by thousands of gallons of burning jet fuel. Chief Pfeiffer made the critical decision: prioritize evacuation and rescue over fire suppression. With fire on that scale, that high up, with that much jet fuel burning, there was no putting it out. The goal was to get people out, get them down, save as many lives as possible. Firefighters began their ascent at 8:52 a.m. They entered Stairwell B, the primary evacuation route, and started climbing. Each firefighter carried hose bundles, extra oxygen tanks, medical equipment, and tools. The total weight was over 100 pounds. They were climbing into a burning building while thousands of office workers were descending, trying to escape. The firefighters pressed to the right side of the stairwell, allowing evacuees to pass on the left. It was orderly, controlled. The firefighters called out encouragement to the descending workers. "Keep moving. You're doing great. All the way down. Don't stop." Many firefighters knew this would be a one-way trip. The radio communications captured their awareness. One firefighter radioed, "We're heading up to 70. It's going to take a while." Another responded, "Copy that. Take your time. Pace yourself." They understood the math. 90 floors up, maybe 3 to 4 minutes per floor with all the gear and equipment. That was 6 hours minimum, just to reach the fire floors. And then what? Fight a fire fed by jet fuel, with building water pressure that might not even reach that high? But they went anyway, because that was the job, because people were trapped up there, because someone had to try. At 9 a.m., approximately 200 firefighters were inside the North Tower, either climbing the stairs or staging in the lobby. Outside, more companies were arriving. Fire trucks lined West Street. Hose lines were being connected to hydrants. Command chiefs were coordinating the response from the plaza. Ladder Company 6 reached the 27th floor of the North Tower at 9:02 a.m. They had been climbing for 10 minutes and had 66 floors still to go. The stairwell was hot, not from fire, but from the mass of people moving through it, from the exertion, from the building's ventilation system, trying to cope with smoke and heat from 90 floors above. Then, at 9:03 a.m., everything got worse. Chapter 3. The Second Impact, 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower between the 77th and 85th floors at 9 hours 3 minutes and 11 seconds a.m. The explosion was massive. The entire South Tower shook. The North Tower, connected underground to the South Tower through the mall complex, shook as well. In the North Tower stairwells, firefighters and evacuees felt the vibration. People screamed. Some thought their building was collapsing, but Chief Pfeiffer's voice came over the radio, calm and clear. "Second plane has hit the South Tower. All units maintain positions. Continue evacuation protocols." Now both towers were burning. This was no longer an accident. This was an attack. America was under attack, and the World Trade Center was ground zero. The fdny immediately shifted strategy. Resources had to be split between two towers. Chief Peter Gansey, the highest-ranking uniformed firefighter in the fdny, arrived on scene and established overall command. He made the critical decision: continue rescue operations in both towers while preparing for the possibility that one or both might become unstable. Firefighters began entering the South Tower at 9:05 a.m. Just 2 minutes after it was hit, they established a command post in the South Tower lobby and began the same process: climb the stairs, reach the impact zone, rescue anyone they could find. Father Michael Judge, the fdny chaplain, was in the North Tower lobby, administering last rites to a firefighter who'd been killed by falling debris. At 68 years old, Father Judge had been with the fdny for years, providing spiritual support to firefighters. He moved through the lobby, offering prayers and comfort to the injured and dying. At 9:59 a.m., falling debris from the South Tower would strike and kill him. He would become the first certified casualty of 9/11s, listed as Victim 0001. By 9:30 a.m., firefighters had established staging areas on multiple floors of both towers. In the North Tower, some units had reached as high as the 35th floor. In the South Tower, companies were staging on the 19th and 40th floors. The plan was to leapfrog staging areas, establish a base, rest, then move higher while bringing up more equipment. The radio communications were professional, methodical, battalion chiefs coordinating positions, firefighters reporting floor-by-floor progress. The urgency was there, but so was the discipline. This was what they trained for, not a plane strike specifically, but mass casualty incidents, high-rise fires, coordinated multi-company operations. What they didn't know, what no one could know, was that the building's structural integrity was failing. The intense heat from burning jet fuel was weakening the steel support columns. The floors were beginning to sag, the buildings were dying from the inside, and everyone inside them was running out of time. Chapter 4. The Race Against Time, 9:30 a.m. to 9:59 a.m. The next 30 minutes would be a race. Firefighters climbing as fast as they could, while building engineers and structural experts tried to assess how long the towers would stand. In the North Tower, Ladder Company 6 had reached the 35th floor by 9:35 a.m. They'd been climbing for 43 minutes. They found a woman named Josephine Harris, who could barely walk due to exhaustion and an existing medical condition. Captain John Jonas made a decision. His entire company would slow down to help this one woman. They didn't know it yet, but this decision would save all their lives. On the 19th floor of the South Tower, a staging area had been established with multiple companies present. Engine Company 216, Ladder Company 111. Battalion Chief Oreo Palmer was coordinating from the 78th floor of the South Tower, the sky lobby where the plane had hit. His radio transmissions were calm and professional. Battalion 7 to Battalion 7 Alpha, we've got 2 isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. This was remarkable. Chief Palmer had climbed 78 floors in 56 minutes while wearing full gear. He was reporting that the fire was manageable, that they could actually fight it and rescue people trapped on that floor. It was exactly the kind of heroic effort the FDNY was known for. But at 9:37 a.m., the first signs of structural failure became evident. Engineers monitoring the buildings noticed unusual sagging in the South Tower. The fire had been burning for 34 minutes. The steel was compromised. Nobody knew the building had less than 22 minutes left. At 9:45 a.m., the NYPD Aviation Unit, helicopters circling the towers, reported that the South Tower was in danger of collapse. The pilot radioed, "I don't think this has too much longer to go. I would evacuate all people within the area of that second building." But the message didn't reach all the firefighters inside. Radio communication was spotty. The fire department radios operated on different frequencies than police radios. Some firefighters heard evacuation orders, others didn't. Those who did hear continued their climb anyway. There were still people trapped above them, and leaving meant abandoning those people to die. At 9:50 a.m., Chief Pfeiffer in the North Tower command post radioed an urgent message. "All units, evacuate the building. Repeat, all units evacuate the building." Firefighters began to retreat, slowly, methodically, helping injured civilians, carrying equipment they might need for a secondary collapse. They weren't running, they were conducting an organized withdrawal, because that's what their training demanded. At 9:56 a.m., Engine Company 55 radioed that they were on the 35th floor of the North Tower and beginning descent. Ladder Company 6, helping Josephine Harris, was on the 27th floor. Squad 18 was on the 40th floor. All were moving down as fast as they could while maintaining order and helping any civilians they encountered. At 9:58 a.m., firefighters in the South Tower lobby heard a new sound, a deep rumbling that grew louder and louder. The building was groaning, the steel was twisting, the floors above were beginning to fail. At 9 hours 59 minutes and 0 seconds a.m., the South Tower collapsed. Chapter 5. The South Tower Collapse. 9:59 a.m. The collapse began at the impact zone, the 77th floor where the plane had struck. The intense heat had weakened the steel columns beyond their capacity to hold the weight above them. The upper floors began to tilt slightly to the south, and then the entire structure gave way. Floor pancaked onto floor, in a cascade of destruction that took just 10 seconds, 110 floors of steel and concrete and glass falling in on itself, creating a massive cloud of dust and debris that exploded outward at hurricane force. Chief Oreo Palmer, on the 78th floor of the South Tower coordinating rescue efforts, died instantly. Every firefighter above the 20th floor died instantly. 60 FDNY personnel were killed in the South Tower collapse. 60 men who had climbed into a burning building knowing the risk, who had pushed higher and higher, trying to reach trapped civilians, who had stayed when they could have left, who had done their jobs until the very last second. The collapse of the South Tower sent a shockwave through the North Tower. Firefighters climbing down felt the building shake violently. Debris from the South Tower struck the North Tower, shattering windows and sending more dust and rubble into the stairwells. In the North Tower lobby, Chief Pfeiffer's command post was obliterated by the dust cloud from the South Tower. The marble space became a hellscape of darkness and dust so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Firefighters were blown off their feet. Equipment was buried. The command structure momentarily collapsed into chaos. But even in chaos, the FDNY maintained discipline. Chiefs began accounting for units, radioing roll calls, determining who was still in the building and where they were. The goal was clear: get every firefighter out of the North Tower before it too collapsed. At 10 a.m., exactly 1 minute after the South Tower fell, Chief Gansey ordered a complete evacuation of the North Tower and the entire area. All units were to withdraw immediately, no exceptions. The message went out on every radio frequency. Command to all units, evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Firefighters on high floors of the North Tower received the message and began their descent with renewed urgency. They were still helping civilians. That never stopped. But now the pace increased. The building had just lost its twin. Everyone understood that the North Tower could be next. Ladder Company 6, still helping Josephine Harris down from the 27th floor, picked up their pace. They were making about 1 floor every 2 minutes now, much faster than the ascent, but still agonizingly slow. Captain Jonas made another decision. They would not leave Josephine. If she couldn't make it down, they would all stay with her. It was fdny code. You don't leave anyone behind, civilian or firefighter. You get them out, or you die trying. At 10:15 a.m., 16 minutes after the South Tower collapse, most firefighters had evacuated the North Tower, but some were still inside. Some were still climbing down. Some were trapped by debris or helping trap civilians. Some had lost radio contact and didn't know about the evacuation order. At 10:20 a.m., Chief Gansey was outside the North Tower, standing on West Street, coordinating the final evacuation efforts. He was the highest-ranking uniformed officer in the FDNY, responsible for over 11,000 firefighters. He could have been anywhere else, in a command vehicle, at a safe distance, but he was there, on the street, making sure his firefighters got out. At 10 hours 28 minutes and 22 seconds a.m., the North Tower collapsed. Chapter 6. The North Tower Collapse. 10:28 a.m. The North Tower had burned for 102 minutes, longer than the South Tower, but the structural failure followed the same pattern. The steel columns weakened by intense heat, the floors beginning to sag, and then catastrophic collapse from the impact zone down. The tower fell in almost the exact same way as the South Tower, straight down, floor onto floor, creating a massive debris cloud that raced through the streets of Lower Manhattan at 70 miles per hour. Chief Peter Gansey died in the collapse, killed by falling debris, as he coordinated the evacuation. He would be the highest-ranking FDNY member to die on 9/11s. Father Michael Judge, whose body had been recovered from the North Tower lobby after the South Tower collapse, was now buried again under the rubble of the North Tower. Ladder Company 6, miraculously, survived. They were in Stairwell B between the 4th and 5th floors when the building collapsed around them. The stairwell remained partially intact, a small pocket of survival in a sea of destruction. All 6 firefighters and Josephine Harris would be rescued hours later, pulled from the rubble alive. But most firefighters inside the North Tower didn't survive. The collapse killed 343 FDNY personnel total, 60 in the South Tower and 283 in the North Tower. It was the single greatest loss of life in FDNY history. More firefighters died on September 11th than had died in the previous 25 years combined. The names would be read later at memorials, but in that moment, all anyone knew was that the building had fallen and hundreds of firefighters were gone. Companies that had responded that morning, full crews of 5 or 6 firefighters, were simply erased. Engine Company 54, Ladder Company 4, Rescue Company 1, Squad 252, entire units lost. Chapter 7. The Aftermath 10:28 a.m. to 5:20 p.m. The collapse of both towers transformed Ground Zero into a war zone. Where the towers had stood just minutes before, there was now a massive pile of twisted steel and pulverized concrete covering 16 acres. The pile was 7 stories high in some places. Fires burned throughout the rubble, fed by fuel lines, electrical systems, and the remains of what had been inside the buildings. And somewhere under all that debris were thousands of people, office workers who hadn't evacuated in time, firefighters who'd been climbing the stairs, civilians who'd been in the underground mall, Port Authority workers, building engineers, security guards, all buried under the rubble. The FDNY immediately shifted from evacuation to rescue and recovery. Firefighters who had just escaped the collapse, covered in dust and ash, turned around and started digging. They didn't go home. They didn't stop to rest. They started searching for survivors, for their brothers, for anyone who might still be alive under the rubble. By 11 a.m., organized rescue operations had begun. Firefighters formed bucket brigades, passing debris hand to hand, creating paths into the rubble pile. Search dogs were brought in to locate signs of life. Thermal imaging cameras tried to detect body heat. Heavy equipment, cranes and excavators, began carefully removing larger pieces of debris. The work was incredibly dangerous. The rubble pile was unstable. Fires were still burning. Steel beams were weakened and could collapse at any moment. The air was toxic, filled with pulverized concrete dust, asbestos, lead, mercury, and hundreds of other chemicals. But firefighters worked anyway, many without respirators because the masks made it hard to breathe, and they couldn't do the physical labor of digging with restricted oxygen. At 12:30 p.m., Port Authority officer Will Jimeno was pulled from the rubble alive. He'd been trapped for over 4 hours. At 8 p.m., Sergeant John McLaughlin was rescued after being trapped for nearly 11 hours. These would be among the last survivors found. Throughout the afternoon and evening, firefighters continued working in 12-hour shifts. They dug through the night, through the smoke and fire and dust, searching for their fellow firefighters. The FDNY had responded with over 200 fire units that morning. Now those same firefighters were refusing to leave, refusing to stop searching, refusing to give up hope that someone might still be alive down there. At 5:20 p.m., Building 7 of the World Trade Center complex collapsed, weakened by debris from the towers and by fires that had burned unchecked all day. Miraculously, everyone had been evacuated from Building 7, and no one died in that collapse. But it added more debris to the pile, more area to search, more danger for the rescue workers. Chapter 8. The days after. The rescue and recovery operation at Ground Zero would last for 9 months, 259 days of around-the-clock digging. Over 500 firefighters worked shifts at the site every single day, rotating through while maintaining their regular duties responding to fires throughout the city. The work took an enormous physical and psychological toll. Firefighters were digging through the remains of their friends and colleagues. Every time they found a piece of FDNY gear, a helmet, a coat, a tool, they knew they were close to finding one of their own. The remains of 343 firefighters would be recovered from the rubble, though many would never be found. Some had been completely pulverized by the collapse. Some were buried so deep they couldn't be reached. The funerals began within days and continued for months. FDNY policy was to give every fallen firefighter a full honors funeral. For 343 firefighters, that meant 343 ceremonies, each attended by thousands. Bagpipers playing Amazing Grace, flag-draped coffins, entire firehouses attending to honor their fallen members. The grief was overwhelming, but so was the solidarity. The families of fallen firefighters received support from the FDNY and from New York City, but the loss was irreplaceable. Children lost fathers, wives lost husbands, parents lost sons. The FDNY lost an entire generation of leadership, battalion chiefs, captains, lieutenants who had decades of experience and had been training the next generation. But even in grief, the FDNY continued its mission. Fires still happened across New York City. Medical emergencies still required response. The department was short-staffed, traumatized, and grieving, but it never stopped operating. Firefighters went to funerals in the morning and responded to calls in the afternoon. They worked at Ground Zero at night and then went on duty at their firehouses the next morning. Chapter 9. The Long-Term Cost. The health impacts of 9/11s on firefighters would take years to fully understand. The toxic dust at Ground Zero contained over 2,500 contaminants: asbestos, lead, mercury, jet fuel, benzene, dioxins, and pulverized glass. Firefighters breathed this air for hours, days, weeks as they worked the pile. Many didn't wear respirators. Many couldn't wear respirators and still do the physical labor required. By 2021, 20 years after 9/11s, more firefighters had died from 9/11-related illnesses than had died on the day itself. Cancers, lung cancer, throat cancer, digestive cancers, respiratory diseases, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, pulmonary fibrosis, heart disease, neurological conditions. The death toll kept rising year after year as the long-term health effects of Ground Zero exposure manifested. The federal government eventually established the World Trade Center Health Program to provide medical monitoring and treatment for 9/11's responders. Thousands of firefighters enrolled, getting regular screenings for the cancers and diseases they knew were coming. The James Zadroga 9/11's Health and Compensation Act, passed in 2010, provided funding for medical care and compensation for sick and dying responders. But no amount of money or medical care could bring back what was lost. The FDNY had lost 343 members in a single day, more than it had lost in its entire 136-year history before that. The trauma affected not just those who were there, but their families, their firehouses, and the entire department for generations. Chapter 10, The Legacy. September 11th, 2001 redefined what it meant to be a New York City firefighter. Before that day, firefighters were respected. Certainly, they ran into burning buildings when everyone else ran out. They saved lives. They were heroes in the traditional sense. But after 9/11's, firefighters became something more. They became symbols of sacrifice, of courage, of unwavering commitment to duty. The image of firefighters climbing the stairs of the World Trade Center while everyone else descended became iconic. The photos of firefighters raising the American flag over the rubble became symbols of American resilience. The names of the 343 became sacred, never forgotten, always honored. The FDNY Memorial Wall lists every member who has died in the line of duty. After 9/11's, 343 names were added all at once. Visitors to FDNY firehouses across New York City can see the photos and plaques honoring those who died. Every September 11th, ceremonies are held at firehouses, at the 9/11's memorial, at cemeteries across the city and the country. The memorial at the World Trade Center site includes the names of all 343 firefighters who died, arranged by company and rank. Visitors run their fingers over the names etched in bronze, leaving flowers and flags and notes of thanks. The 9/11's Memorial Museum includes an entire section dedicated to the FDNY response, with recovered fire trucks, gear, and personal items from fallen firefighters. But perhaps the most important legacy is the one that happens every day in firehouses across America. Young firefighters join the department and learn about what happened on 9/11's. They hear the stories from the firefighters who were there. They learn the names of the 343. They understand that the job isn't just about fighting fires. It's about being willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to save others. The FDNY motto is New York's Bravest. On September 11th, 2001, 343 firefighters proved why. They ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. They climbed stairs when they could have stayed safe on the ground. They kept searching for survivors even after the buildings collapsed. They never gave up, never quit, never stopped doing their jobs until the buildings fell on top of them. That is the role American firefighters played on 9/11's. That is their legacy, and that is why, 23 years later, we still remember their names, honor their sacrifice, and thank them for their service. Epilogue, by the numbers. FDNY response. On September 11th, 2001. 214 FDNY units responded to the World Trade Center. Over 1,000 firefighters were on scene. By 10 a.m., firefighters climbed as high as the 78th floor of the South Tower and 35th floor of the North Tower. 343 FDNY members died, 340 uniformed firefighters, 2 paramedics, and 1 chaplain. 23 NYPD officers died, 37 Port Authority officers died. The fallen by rank: 1 First Deputy Commissioner, 1 Chief of Department, 1 Assistant Chief, 7 battalion chiefs, 2 captains, 9 lieutenants, 319 firefighters, 2 paramedics, 1 chaplain. Long-term health impact. As of 2024, over 360 FDNY members have died from 9/11-related illnesses. Over 11,000 FDNY members and retirees enrolled in WTC Health Program, cancers, respiratory diseases, and other illnesses continued to affect survivors. The rescue effort, Ground Zero Rescue and Recovery, lasted 259 days, 9 months. Over 3 million hours of labor by rescue and recovery workers, 1.8 million tons of debris removed from the site. Last survivor rescued, September 12, 2001, at 12:30 p.m., Port Authority Officer Will Jimeno. The memorial, 343 firefighters' names. are engraved on the 9/11's memorial. FDNY Memorial Wall in Brooklyn lists all line of duty deaths. Every FDNY firehouse displays photos and plaques of members lost on 9/11's. Annual memorial ceremonies held every September 11th end. This narrative is based on real events, radio transcripts, eyewitness testimony, and documented accounts from September 11th, 2001. While some dialogue and internal perspectives are dramatized for storytelling purposes, the timeline, actions, and sacrifice of the FDNY are factually accurate. This story is dedicated to the 343 firefighters who gave their lives on 9/11's and the thousands more who continue to suffer from 9/11 related illnesses. We remember, we honor, we never forget.